the perspective or the point of view that has emerged most strongly, not just since since COVID, or even since the murder of George Floyd in Minneapolis, but it has been around. It's been around since the '60s, really. Anti-racism. I guess I would call it critical race theory, sort of adapted in a popular form. And one of the current hot books on this subject in the United States is called How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram Kendi. And I just pulled a sentence from his text because I think it starts to frame the difficulty that we have. What's the problem with being not racist? It is a claim that signifies neutrality. I am not a racist, but neither am I aggressively against racism. But there is no neutrality in the racism struggle. The opposite of racist isn't not racist, it is anti-racist. And that's a very clear position, a clear statement of the anti-racism position. And I find it highly problematic because it's one of those binaries. You have to choose a side, only I think reality is much more complicated than I'm a racist, I'm not a racist, or I am an anti-racist. As I've thought about this, one of the things that has occurred to me is that any decent human being that you meet, I argue, is not for racism. If you ask them, they would be against racism. But the vast majority of those will never call themselves anti-racist. And attempting to make people think this way, I believe, is part of the problem that we have today. In anti-racism, I find a kind of dogmatism about assumptions, about norms, about an analysis, about a vocabulary, about a training, and about a form of leadership. I'll give you an example about a form of leadership. Most of my work since 1990 has been about trying to build and sustain strong interracial coalitions. That form of organizing only works if the collective leadership of the organization reflects the member organizations that take part in it. So you could never have a powerful coalition in that model. I'm not saying it's the only model, but you couldn't have a powerful coalition in that model that was led by people of just one group. And I've heard this from my first experience of anti-racism training in the 1990s, that in an interracial coalition in an urban city in the US like New Orleans, Black people must lead and white people must follow. And I understand the point, but I don't believe you can build an organization with very much transformative power on that model of leadership. And then the last point is that questioning or disagreeing with any of these assumptions is instantly labeled as racism. By contrast, these are some points that I would make about effective interracial coalitions. They involve respect for the perspectives and priorities of others. No single point of view dominates. And it should say bigots need not apply. Apologies. These things are animated by a constant focus on interests. What can my group accomplish by aligning its power with your group that it can't do by itself? Collective leadership reflects member organizations. They operate by what I would call good enough, that is not perfect, consensus decision-making, and they practice mutual accountability in a public way. So 30 years of working at this 4 lessons that I have learned the hard way, not in any book, but in the arena. Quote unquote, honest conversations about race are not real conversations. They're not required to build strong interracial coalitions, and they actually tend to weaken them. Just a quick word on that. I've lost count of how many meetings I've gone to address this or that particular issue, like policing. I've spent a lot of time on policing, where someone will say, we can't do anything on this issue until we have an honest conversation about race. And I'm a veteran of some of those honest conversations about race. And one of the things that's most notable about them is that they're not conversations, because conversations go back and forth. And these are basically lectures by anti-racists to the white people who show up for the training. Second point, again, learned the hard way. The most diverse coalition and the most diverse coalition that might actually accomplish something are never the same coalition. If you go for the maximum diversity in your coalition, there will be people at that table who are not able to participate in creating an interracial collaborative. Effective, durable coalitions cannot be led by members of one group, and making white people feel guilty is not a strategy for social change. Then I'm going to close with this. Before the storm, those of us working on these issues, as John said, we were having a difficult time because the city was so profoundly polarized racially. I mean, we couldn't even have a conversation about improving playgrounds for children across racial lines. It was a very discouraging time. Really no positive movement forward on these issues was possible. The city was losing population. Our educational system was a mess. Murder was very high. You name it, and it was broken in New Orleans before the hurricane. This is a picture of obviously the same 2 places, one before and one after the storm. If you look on the left, bottom right of the one on the left, you'll see the sign that says wrong way. And then look over and you'll see the same sign on the right, almost, but not quite underwater. So what I did was, I did a social network analysis of about 65 people who were working at these issues before the storm and then after the storm. So this is the whole network of people before the hurricane. That's what the network among us looked like. And this is what it looked like after the hurricane. Before and after. The density is an interesting thing to see there, but it's 3 times as dense here as it was before. Now I'm going to show you the whole network broken down by sector. Blue, government; red, civic or civil society; and orange, business, before the hurricane and after the hurricane, 2 years after. Then I'm going to show you just one of the sectors, the civic or civil society subgroup. That's what it looked like. So we've got 9 people out here who literally have no connection with anyone. And the rest of it is quite thin, as you see. And there's the civic subgroup 2 years after the storm. And you know what was going on between each of those pairs of before and after was the work of putting the city together again after the hurricane. So if you say what happened between the pre and post network analyses, what happened was this network and lots of other people engaged in putting back together a broken city. Okay, this is my last one. The alternative to dealing with race wisely. You see this sort of paramilitary or quasi-military or wannabe military character on the left. I don't know if you can read the little patch that's on its back, Make America Great Again. And this is what he said. James Jackson is a white nationalist who's serving life in prison now, and he tried to start a racial war by going to, I want to say it was Atlanta, with what he called a short sword inside his coat, and picking out someone black to kill. And he settled on a homeless black person who was rummaging around for food in garbage cans, and killed him, stabbed him multiple times. And so this is what Mr. Jackson had to say. The racial world war starts today. This political terrorist attack is a formal declaration of global total war on the Negro races. They must be exterminated as quickly as possible. A global policy aiming at their complete destruction must be implemented immediately. Okay, I'm going to stop there, and I welcome your questions or comments.